Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. With me today is longtime listener, poet laureate, and Taya master Anne-Marie Young. This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. Before we got started, we were kind of chatting about how the weather is a little bit crazy in the northern hemisphere this time of year because things are starting to get cold. They were warm and now they're cold, and we say, what the hell? We were just in bathing suits a week ago, and now all of a sudden we're dealing with winter coats. This is not a normal thing. Well, apparently it is a normal thing. We live in the northern hemisphere. But yes. Anne-Marie, I was really glad to hear that even though things are freezing cold, and even though there was a little bit of jiggling going on with the internet connection, you're doing good. That's the most important part. So I presume that's still true, right? That hasn't changed in the last 5 minutes, right?
No, nothing's changed. All is tickety
okay, good.
Over here.
That's right. Yes, good stuff. I like that. And then Dana Diaz is joining us today. She is the author of the book Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. You can kind of get an idea of where the conversation's going to be going today, but we will try to keep it as positive as we can. That's always the challenge whenever we're dealing with these really, really deep, dark night of the soul kind of issues, keeping it positive. But we always find a way to do that somehow. How do we do that, Anne-Marie? I mean, do you have a clue? Like, how do we figure out, we're dealing with these crazy, horrible, dark-ass issues, and then we somehow find a way to laugh?
Because the secret's finding the appreciation in everything.
Yeah. There it is. Of course. I should have known. So anyway, Dana, thank you for joining us. Oh, go ahead.
No, one thing I was going to say, from all these podcasts, one thing we've learned is the greatest things come out of the worst situations, don't they?
Yes. Oh, boy, that's so true. That is so completely true. I have a feeling the same thing's going to happen with Dana's story. So, Dana, first of all, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm well. Thank you very much.
And tell us the story, because we love stories, and that's always usually the way we get the things started around here.
Well,
so just tell us the story.
Absolutely. I don't know where to start. I mean, it's a 473-page book, but, we can try to sum it up there. But I do appreciate what you guys are doing, because I think there is positive in everything. And I know some people say that's toxic positivity and all this, but you have to make the best of your circumstances. And there hopefully is a happy ending at some point. And for me, it took 40 some years, but it's happy. Everything's good now. So,
that's toxic positivity. I want to mention that for a second, because that has come up on the program in the past. And I've given a little thought to that, because I'm asking myself, where exactly does that come from? I mean, I know what they mean. What they mean is that even when everything is going bad, people just want to deny that because they want to pretend it's not really happening. So they just kind of put it out of their consciousness and so forth. But there's a difference between appreciating and denying. And I think that's what gets lost in the whole positive toxicity thing. They kind of ignore that fact.
Agreed. Because I've been called toxically positive, and I called it trying to survive in the midst of really crappy circumstances and trying to be, maintain some sense of good for my son out of the bad that we were living. And I don't think that's toxic. I don't think it's a bad thing. And if somebody disagrees, that's up to them. But it helped us out. And, even now, even after everything has been said and done, a life of abuse and trauma and domestic violence and all these things, I can smile and I can laugh, and I can even laugh sometimes about the things that happened. Not that they were all funny, but you have to look for the good in life, because otherwise you're just going to sit in this misery, in this depressing place. And, that's how people get trapped in their victimhood. And who wants to do that when it's so much happier, to just thrive and heal and move on from things?
It's interesting, though, that you say who wants to live like that, because I don't think anybody would actually, they wouldn't volunteer for it saying, yes, I want to live like a victim, but they choose it anyway.
You'd be surprised. I mean, it's unfortunate how many people, even that I have met, that have been through awful things. And I validate that, but they say, no, I can't think that way. That won't work for me. They just want to negate every bit of advice or every bit of encouragement you give them. So it's like they just want to stay there in that place. And that's fine, because not everybody's ready to heal. after something happens. They sometimes need time. We go through hurt first, then we go through anger about it, and apparently somewhere in there's this victimhood. And I've been there where I felt pitiful and felt sorry for myself. But then I was like, okay, time to get up, got some scraped knees, got some scraped bruise, just wash everything off, move on, But not everybody wants to. Not everybody's ready. So for the people that do, though, we are happy to be here to offer, some sense of hope for what might be beyond a very bad situation. Because unfortunately, a lot of people do get stuck also in their domestic situations for various reasons. So, this is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. I want to bring light to that. So
I didn't know that was this month's designation.
It is. And purple is the color. So the next time you put on purple, Walt, you can think of domestic violence awareness. Wear a lot of it. You're almost purple today.
Almost, not quite.
You're in outer space. So maybe the lighting is different up there. We'll pass it off as purple. But yeah, so domestic violence, I mean, it's a real thing. And what people don't realize, and I think what gets mistaken and lost, is that not everybody has the black eyes and the bruises and the stuff all over their body to physically show it. Like Anne Marie and I were discussing for a second before the show, my title of my book, Gasping for Air. It actually is a reference to the lung disease that I developed after enduring 4 decades of other abuses. Because the chronic stress every day of living in that fight or flight mode, just the stress of being in an abusive situation, caused so much cortisol, which is kind of like adrenaline, but it's a stress hormone, caused so much cortisol to run through my body at such high rates for so long that my body thought it had to fight or eradicate something like a cancer or a virus. So it started to kill off my white blood cells. I was having all kinds of autoimmune reactions. So they actually tested me for various autoimmunities, found a few things here and there, but ended up that I had this rare lung syndrome called upper airway resistance syndrome that is very common in abuse victims. The neurologist says it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at the same time. So it messes with you. Yeah. I call it it's like musical chairs, but it's like musical symptoms every day. So.
That sounds like such a treat.
But you know what the difference is? And this is here, we'll give everybody the positive stuff before we go to dark stuff. But the positive part of it is that actually 3 years ago tomorrow, the 17th of October, 2020, was the most violent situation with my ex-husband, about whom this relationship that we're saying is very dark. This all happened. This is what the book is about. But October 17th of 2020 was when the most violence happened. And there was an attempt on my life. There was a gun. It's all in the book. Y'all can read the details in there. Police, the whole thing. It was not nice. And I thought I might die that night. But this is 3 years later and I'm good. At that point when this night happened, we were already divorced, by the way. That narcissists don't like you moving on. So he was not happy that, it's very offensive to divorce a narcissist. But at that point, I was so sick with this lung issue. I had dropped down to 93 pounds. I was skeletal. I was weak. I was frail. Yeah. I actually had a little oxygen unit that I wore in a backpack with a face mask just so I could breathe and keep my oxygen levels up, because they would drop down to sometimes around 83%. COVID level was 93%, to give people an idea. So if you had COVID and couldn't breathe, I really couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, just having a lot of issues, like my hands, my muscles wouldn't work. So I was having trouble even tearing toilet paper off the roll, picking up a dryer sheet. My hands would not pick up a dryer sheet. Just basic things you take for granted. So that tells you how sick I was. And my doctor actually said my body was starting to shut down. So
well, especially at that body weight. I mean, that's a body weight that's like a few pounds away from a heart attack.
Yeah. And my heart, what I was told, I was at a 50% risk of congestive heart failure. I was on the brink of not being here. And then he made this attempt on my life, which talk about stress. That'll get your adrenaline and your cortisol.
I would think so. Yeah.
A little bit. But I just want to point that out because 3 years later, I mean, my face is filled out a little. I've gained my weight back. I'm healthy. I don't have like a gray pallor to my skin. I think I'm glowing. A little of it is makeup and lighting, but things are good. You know what I mean? I don't even know the last
by the
time.
way.
Thank you. I don't even know the last time I used my oxygen machine, and I can tear toilet paper off now and take care of myself. I mean, we are laughing, but honestly,
that's a big thing.
There are people that you take so many things for granted until you can't do them. And because it was just caused by this stress, I just felt it was so important to take this journal that I had been keeping a record in and turn it into a book to really explain to people, like, you think you're being noble, staying for the kids, or you think that, maybe you don't deserve better, or whatever it is that keeps you there. Sometimes it's finances. Sometimes you're afraid, like I was, to even try to leave. But my God, you might be killing yourself in the meantime by staying, because your body is not equipped to handle that kind of stress. And not to mention the mental health aspects of it. So I'm like to point that out.
You said also that you'd been dealing with these issues related to narcissistic people for all your life. It's what it sounded like.
Literally.
And obviously that has a tremendous stress attached to it, but it also raises an important question that I think we need to address first, because I think there's a lot of disinformation about what narcissism is and what it isn't.
Yes.
So let's like set a definition plain here. What exactly are we talking about when we're talking about dealing with narcissistic personalities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be clear too that I'm dealing with narcissistic abuse. So these are like the bad narcissists. I kind of liken it to tumors. You have benign tumors that are there. They're not really bothering you. They're just there. And you have malignant tumors. And that's what we call those narcissists, are malignant narcissists that going to cause you problems, might kill you. No joke. But you got to be careful of them. So on a very, very basic level, narcissists are just people who feel very important and much more superior to everyone else. They feel entitled. They want servitude. Everybody should basically bow down to them. They want admiration and praise, extraordinarily so, not like a normal human being, to fulfill their ego. And again, this is a very, very basic definition of these people. But the important thing to remember here is that the malignant ones will go to any extent necessary to make themselves feel this admiration that they need. They want this praise. They want, they have to be the best, the most important. They want this attention on them. Nobody else can have or be anything that they are not. And again, they take these very extreme measures, by targeting one or two people. And obviously when I'm talking about my book, I'm talking about in a romantic situation, but it can be a coworker, it can be a friend, it can be a parent, it could be anybody. And I have unfortunately had, multiple experiences with malignant narcissists. So there are 2 more books coming next year.
Wow. 2 more.
Yeah. One will be about my childhood. It's kind of the prequel to Gasping for Air, because a lot of the questions that came up with this book, and I, on podcasts or from readers, are, well, how did you end up in a narcissistic relationship? Well, when you're abused as a child and sent out into the world feeling unworthy and undeserving and have low self-esteem, you become a people-pleasing codependent. And, that serves perfectly well to a narcissist who wants you to, do all the tricks so they can give you the little treats here and there. And then they mistreat you the rest of the time. So that'll kind of explain some of the psychological stuff that happens to an abused child that then goes out into the world seeking a romantic relationship and ends up basically following the same pattern. That's why we talk, people talk about generational cycles of abuse. This is how that happens. And then, the prequel will talk about another narcissist that I've come across in the last few years that kind of caught me off guard. And that was a friend that I was friends with for 16 years. And you would think I'd know the red flags by now, and I do, but boy, you just don't want to see them, I guess, sometimes. So
that's it. That's an important point right there. It's a question in my mind. Is it that you don't want to see them, or is it that you've been trained throughout your life to not see them?
That's a really good point. I can say for me, it was both when I met my ex, because in my childhood, here's some little nuggets for people to understand a little bit of my childhood, is that I was born to a teenage mother who did not want me. And this was at a time that it wasn't okay for teenagers to have babies. So there was a lot of shame and ridicule, to her and to the family. It was not okay. But she did not want me. And I'm saying this not just because it is openly talked about to this day around me, but she had her tubes tied immediately after my birth. I came out, the placenta came out, she had her tubes tied.
Okay.
As a teenager. So this woman didn't want kids.
Right.
She ended up marrying a man who is one of these very overt narcissists. This is what people typically think about when they think of a narcissist. He is going to tell you what he has that you don't, and he's going to tell you how wonderful he is, and nobody knows more than him. One of these people. Everybody knows one of those. They're lots of fun, especially when you're raised by one.
Interesting term. Lots of fun. Yeah.
Well,
gee, I can hardly wait.
They can be. They're annoying, but sometimes you can just, if it's somebody at work or whatever, you just kind of keep them at arm's length and just kind of roll your eyes.
Yeah. Okay. Comments. Yeah. All right.
But when you're under the same roof and being raised by one, not so much fun. So he was very vocal when I was growing up, telling me, and I always tell people, think about a 4 or 5 year old little girl and imagine telling her, nobody loves you. Nobody's ever going to love you. Ugh. I shouldn't have to pay for you. I don't know why I have to clothe you and shelter you and feed you. Your mother doesn't even love you. You shouldn't even exist. You should have never been born. Nobody wants you here. You're not part of this family. I can go on and on because I'm 47. This stuff has been playing like a recorder in my head over and over and over and over for 40 some years. So, when you are thinking that way, or when those things are being said to you, you start to internalize it and you do start to think of yourself that way. But I knew it was wrong because you can tell I'm a little fiery. I've always been that way. Even as a child, I was very outspoken and I was like, you can't say that to me. I'm going to tell my mom on you. Well,
so you had some defense built in. That's pretty good.
Oh,
that's
very
unusual.
much so. Yeah. I was something when I was a kid. So I stood up for myself, but I would go to my mother and she would always say, no, you're just lying to get attention. Or,
wow.
And this is where I was going with this, all these things. She would just negate me. But the biggest thing that stuck with me was that she would constantly tell me, well, he's just so extreme with you and mistreats you like that to the same extent as he loves you. Meaning, yeah. That's basically your mother saying, well, if somebody loves you, they're going to hurt you. And add on to this the fact that he was physically abusing me. There were a lot of things going on, being
so basically justification.
He was grabbing me at the back of the head and banging my head against the wall. I picked up the phone once to call my mother and he took it and beat me with it. The worst of it was, when I was older, I think it was 17, there was strangling and throwing downstairs and just awful things. many children have it worse, and I don't dismiss that. But honestly, for me, I'd take those beatings all day long over the verbal abuse. The verbal abuse affected me most. I'm not even bothered so much by the physical part of it. But there unfortunately are people that have survived child abuse that the stories I've heard are horrific, what they have gone through. So I guess I'm thankful that I didn't suffer it to that extent, but it was not fun enduring either one. But certainly the words never leave you, and that's the worst part of it.
I mean, I'm sitting here listening to your story, and I'm thinking to myself, my childhood was nowhere near what your childhood is. I can't imagine what it's like going through what you went through.
And like I said, and so many people have suffered much worse. But that is how I went into the world. To answer your initial question is that, I saw the red flags. But I also had a mother feeding into me my whole childhood that, somebody's going to treat you like crap if they love you. And there were nice boys that asked me out in high school, and I didn't know what to do with that. I don't know if I needed the chaos, but I think in some strange psychological way I did.
Well, it's familiar.
Needed that to be comfortable. Exactly. Yeah. But then I also, even though I saw red flags with my ex, right from the get-go, I literally, the first time I ever met him within seconds, I was like, ooh, I know this personality. Reminded me of who? My stepfather.
Right.
I was like, no, sir, I'm good. But what did my mother do? And what did I find myself doing? Enabling and excusing it. Oh, he must just be in a bad mood. Maybe it's me. Maybe I did something to provoke that. Maybe, So there went a little time, and every time he overreacted or mistreated me, he would push it a little bit further. And that's the tricky part of narcissistic abuse. I always tell people, nobody, or maybe there are some people, but most people are not on the streets trying to date like Chucky. If there's a guy running around with a butcher knife and crazy hair and a sweater,
that would make it easy, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd be very clear. You would know, right? Okay, now I know what I'm dealing with.
It's not hot. It's not cute at all. Like, we are not attracted to that. If Chucky asked me out, I'd be like, no, you're cool, but I'll pass. I'm good. So these are people. We have to remember, like Ted Bundy, the serial killer, charming, handsome, right? And he killed a lot of women because women were lured in. That's what you want to think about when you think about a narcissist. So we fall for that facade, and then they lure us in, and they do this insidious thing where they just continually push boundaries. They do something that you can excuse, to something, but you're not too upset about it, because it's not enough to really upset you, but something isn't sitting right with you, if that makes any sense. You're like teetering on that edge of like, is this a deal breaker, or is it, no, I'm just going to let it go. As long as it doesn't happen again, but then it happens again. And next time it's just a little bit worse. And the next time after that's a little bit worse. But by the time you get to the end, you look back and say, hold on, how did I get here? Because I don't even remember it happening,
That was going to be my
on you.
That was going to be my question. Just like it starts there, and then that becomes the normal, so it's not that bad, and then a little bit more, and it just becomes then more acceptable.
Yeah, and it's not that you accept it, but I think you just become so unfazed by it. Yeah, because
which is a form of acceptance, really.
I guess
it really
is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you become an enabler involuntarily, which is odd. But then in the midst of all this, so here's the other part of narcissistic abuse. It's probably one of the more traumatic forms of abuse, only because it's not just physical or it's not just verbal. Granted, I suffered both in my childhood, but you have the added aspects of financial abuse, legal abuse, sexual abuse. Sometimes not every narcissist abuses you in all these ways, but there is so much going on. And then you do have the psychological aspects and the mental health. You can't not be hypervigilant and depressed and anxious and all these things when you have all this stuff coming at you.
Right.
So it becomes that much more complicated. And then you decide to have a kid or multiple children, and now you're trying to maintain some peace and normalcy for them. So that acceptance that you're talking about becomes even more of an issue, because I never thought of myself as submissive. I know there's people out there saying, oh, well, I would never let somebody do that to me. Nobody's ever going to control me. If somebody did this or that, well, guess what? You do it. You do it because you're afraid. You know, my ex used to sit there with a knife next to him when he watched TV every night. And I'm scared of knives. And he knew I was scared of knives. It was a nasty looking thing. But he did that because it's kind of like putting an shock collar on a dog. You know, it keeps them in line. They know that invisible fence is around the yard. They're not going to cross that line. Well, I knew what lines I shouldn't cross. I knew what parameters to stay in. So it's not about being submissive or weak. It's about not wanting to get hurt and not wanting your child to see you mistreated, and just not wanting to deal with it because you're dealing with all of this other stuff, and it gets very overwhelming for a person.
And it's also about getting a message. I mean, he's clearly sending a message. The reason I even mentioned that part is that my ex-wife, I've been divorced for a year, but my ex-wife was a former psychotherapist, and she was also somebody who worked in various kinds of, you might call them mental health facilities. They really weren't. They were more facilities for, kids who've been living in troubled families, often foster type, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And there was one situation where she had a boss who did very much the same kind of thing. In fact, he called her into his office at one point, and he had a knife and he put it on the desk, and it went right over her head. She had no idea why that knife was there. So it didn't have the desired effect because she didn't make the connection, which frustrated him to no end, because he's trying so hard to make her see a connection between that knife and intimidating her, and it wasn't working. So, I mean, that's a key portion of it, that you have to get the messaging. And if you get that, they love that. That's exactly what they're hoping for.
Yeah, you just got the message to me. I don't know if you're like, I just literally got chills and kind of froze up a little when you said that, because that's literally what it was like. Yeah. There was even a situation, was it right before, or no, it was right after my ex moved out. He was monitoring us with cameras. Me and my son. Well, our son, but it's my son. Sorry. But
no apology necessary.
I came home one afternoon, and he must have seen that I came home. He got a notification. He accessed the house, just didn't say one word, walked in right past me, up the stairs to the master bedroom, came down holding his handgun, walked right out of the house. Nothing was said, and I was so, I was shaken up. And, people's reaction is, well, what did he do? What did he say?
He just did
Nothing. That's the thing. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
But nothing had to happen to cause that fear in me.
Right.
He just wanted to make a point of me knowing that he had that gun.
Yep. It was just a
message.
message.
It's scary. And even the knife thing. And I'm sorry that your ex-wife had to even go through that
well, it actually protected her, believe it or not, because she didn't get the message. It didn't work.
Right.
So she didn't. It didn't have that effect on her. But
it's sick that people don't understand.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think they said I've just recently read that knives are the second most common weapon used, in domestic violence, mainly because they're so easily, you can conceal them easily. You can carry them. They're more, and they're more accessible than guns. But neither one is right. So. All these people too that will say, well, if it was so bad, why didn't you leave? Well, I don't know. When somebody emails you and texts you and tells your neighbors he's planning on killing you and he's walking around with knives and guns and he's threatening to take your child away and creating, narcissists love to create a narrative about you that you're crazy and you're mentally unstable and you're an unfit parent and all these things. Even though you're at home all day with their kid, you're an unfit parent. And even though you have done everything and anything for them, and you're actually just having normal reactions to really abnormal psychotic behavior, you're crazy.
It's a key piece of what trauma is.
Yeah.
I mean, we use the word trauma, but I think people often kind of skip over what that means. When you're experiencing trauma, you're frozen in place. You literally don't feel like you can do anything. Of course you can. Of course there are always options open. But when you're feeling the trauma, when you're feeling in that negative space, for whatever reason it might be, it might have nothing to do with a narcissist. It might have to do with the fact that you just got in an auto accident. It might be, something, your mom
Yes.
died. It could be almost anything, right?
Yes.
But when you're in that traumatic state, your brain shuts down. It can't do anything at that point because you're mentally immobilized. So we could argue all day long. We could argue all day long that, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? But it's a pointless argument because if your brain is shut down, that's why you don't do anything.
Right.
You're constantly in survival.
Right. It is survival. There are a lot of people, though, that don't get it. They just don't believe it because it's hard, too, for victims because, again, we've got Ted Bundy out on the streets, not Chucky. He's Chucky at home, but he's Ted Bundy on the streets. And we're saying he did this, he said that, and people they're not equating the two. It's I call it Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. That's what I used to call my ex because it's exactly what it was. And I never knew what I was going to get. But the other part of why you stay is that they sense when they're losing you. They know when they've mistreated you because it's intentional. So they feel you pull away. They feel you kind of, cowering and you don't want to do this anymore. So they do all the things that you like and say all the things you need to hear to keep you. Because then you always have that hope. Well, maybe if I'm better, maybe if I do this or that or the other thing, or I don't do this, that, and the other thing, he'll treat me good all of the time. Maybe it's just me that I provoke this bad part of him because he's not that way at church. He's not that way at his mother's house. He's not that way at his sister's house. It's just that way with me. So it must be me.
It's kind of like living in a horror film, isn't it? I mean,
yes.
it's like you are the main protagonist in a horror film, horror film. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, interesting, but like I said,
not the word I'd pick, but I get it. Yeah.
Not the word I'd pick either, but we're alive, so I have to watch my mouth. I was going to say it's a sort of, show if you get my drift. Yes. Yeah. That is what it's like. But there is, like I said, in the midst of all that, if there is somebody that's listening that is in an abusive situation, I've been there and I'm not saying you should be how I was, but you have to try to find the light every once in a while and find the good. And I know it's so hard, because you do feel stuck and I did, but I feel
How'd you do it?
I feel like I had to for my son. If it weren't for him, I probably would have been in fetal position constantly crying in a dark closet and who knows?
That makes sense because it's easier to do something for somebody we care about than it is for ourselves. So that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I feel like he saved me because the other thing about narcissism is they like to isolate you. So I was taken 90 miles away from everyone and everything I knew. And, then you have the added factor for me that I didn't have a mother or father or anybody to go to,
Right.
There was nowhere to turn. I couldn't have friends because he didn't like any of my friends. I could barely go to church because going to church every Sunday was a fight, because he would say, I love God more than him, or I'm screwing the priest or something. It was always some reason I shouldn't even go to church. He literally told me once that the house was my prison and he treated it.
Wow.
So I had to do the best I could for my son. And if it weren't for him, honestly, I do think he saved me. I'm not sure that I wouldn't have, probably thought about suicide or something because you just feel hopeless. You feel like you're never going to get out. But what made a difference for me, obviously getting sick was the turning point when I had to really just say to myself, okay, am I just going to die and this is it? And that's all it was.
Mm-hmm.
And my life is over and that's just it. And I guess to an extent, life is that for some people, but I had not even begun to live my life because everything I had wanted to do, he had prevented me from doing. And, I wanted to travel and he didn't want to travel. So, and he spent all our money. So I couldn't even if I wanted to. And I'd gone to college for journalism and psychology and I had all kinds of things I wanted to do with that, but I couldn't possibly do anything that was better than him or that gave me any sense of fulfillment or achievement, cause that's not allowed. They have to make sure you feel diminished and small. And, so I was cleaning houses in this small town that he moved us to, instead of pursuing journalism or psychology or anything else that I had in my head for many years growing up. So, I just decided, like, what do I want my life to look like? It was the simple question. I just laid there and I didn't even lay in bed. I laid on a couch in the basement because that's where I stayed in the house. I didn't want to sleep in the same bed with him because I didn't trust him, honestly, with my life. And being asleep is being vulnerable, and I couldn't do that next to him. So I would sleep in the basement with a 2x4 under the knob because I didn't trust him not to come down. And he'd proven why I couldn't trust him a few times. But I laid there one night on the couch in the basement in the dark and just said, what do I want? Is this what I want, to be sick and life is over and that's it? And I'm not here for my son, or I'm no good to anybody because I'm just here. And what happens if I get sicker? Is this man going to take care of me? Because I'm pretty sure he won't even feed me. I'm pretty sure he would just let me die. And I know that sounds so paranoid, but that's where our relationship was, where I honestly thought.
It actually makes sense. I mean, I almost would expect him, I'd be surprised if he didn't behave that way. To be honest, from the story you're telling, it sounds like he didn't even think of you as a human being.
Right. And this was what was going through my head. And I'm thinking, I took it further. I had a lot of time to think. I'm like, I'm going to die or be sicker, and he's going to be out in the world. Oh yes, my poor wife is so sick, or she passed away because she was sick, and he's going to take everybody's pity and just, I couldn't even, no, I was like, this is not going to happen. I'm not.
But you asked yourself a question though.
But I said to myself, what do I want my life to look like?
What do I want to? Yeah, that's an important question.
If nothing was a barrier, what do I want my life to look like?
Yeah.
And like I said, I wanted to do so. I wanted to write. I was a writer. I wanted to speak. I always loved speaking. And helping people was key to that. That's where the psychology came in, because even as a teenager, I thought I would, help victims of abuse. I wanted to help other children, that had been in abusive households. And I thought I would do that by becoming a child and family lawyer. But, well, law wasn't, there's too much injustice in our justice system, and I didn't think I could handle that. So I wanted to approach it from a different way. But this was my opportunity. I'm like, it's not too late. I still have time if I choose. I know what's going to make me better. It's not what I want to do, because realistically, even in a crappy marriage, nobody really wants to get divorced. Nobody wants to do that. You don't get married to get divorced. You don't want to, you think you're going to screw up your kid's life or everything, and he's not screwed up. I can say my son, I'm sure he, has some things that affected him, because, a life like that, you don't come out completely unscathed. But I don't know if it was me and my influence, or if I just got really, really lucky. But my son's fine. He's 20 years old and he's very successful. He doesn't have any addictions with, cigarettes or alcohol or drugs or anything like a lot of kids fall into after coming out of a home like that. He's actually really smart. And it's amazing. I mean, he's really, really successful at his job. He bought his first house at 19 years old. I'm so proud of him, on his own too. Mom didn't help. I know everybody knows me because I would do anything for my son, but he actually did it all on his own. So I'm really proud of him, and I'm happy. And like I said, maybe I'm just lucky, but, I came out, I think I took all the scathing for both of us. And, but I've been able to, see now, looking back, that, man, if I would have known that just getting out of that toxic environment would have been the cure-all for everything, I would have done it sooner, so much sooner, for both of us. Because, like I said, 3 short years, and, not only am I not cleaning houses, not that there was anything wrong with that. I mean, it kept me in great shape, but, I am healthy and I'm breathing and I don't have these symptoms every day, and I'm happy. And I've healed. I mean, I had to go through
a
little therapy for the CPTSD, because that was, the double-edged, I had the childhood trauma and the 25 years with my ex to come to terms with. But, getting out of that toxicity and choosing who to surround myself with and making sure those people were positive. The most amazing thing to me was that coming out of 40 years of always being insulted and demeaned and humiliated, and just the negative talk to me and around me, getting myself out of that and now choosing the people in my life, and they're all speaking about me as if I have value and worth and things like I'm not used to hearing. It has helped me and my own self-talk, because I unfortunately internalized that 40 some years, I was that person that somebody would say, "Oh, congratulations on this." And I'd be like, "Oh, it was nothing. It's not a big deal. It's not, And because I didn't think it was, because nothing I could ever do would ever be good enough for my mother, my stepfather, or my ex-husband. I could win the Nobel Peace Prize and they'd say, "Oh, well, that's nothing."
Why did you win the Pulitzer while you're at it? I mean, come on.
Yeah, that sounds like my stepfather. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But, it's amazing to me that in such a short time, I mean, my life could be completely transformed. And I'm remarried to a longtime friend. I didn't go dating. I don't know if I could have gone even now, go out and date people like strangers, because at least this man, I've known some of his family 15, 16 years, and I knew him for several years. So there was that basis of, I can trust you and I know your people and where you come from.
Yeah.
So,
that's a big deal.
There's a sense of comfort, but boy, to have somebody who thinks so well of me, and that's such a strange thing to say, but after coming out of a marriage where my ex-husband was always telling me he didn't like me and that I'd never be anything and I was a terrible this and that and the other thing, to somebody who thinks so highly of me, like I said, it's just your surroundings, the people, the environment. You definitely do start to become more of what you hear. When like I always said, the reason that I would go to church is that I knew I was no angel, but I would want to be who everybody thought I was. It helped me be better. You know what I mean? And I think when you have people around you that do think very well of you, it helps you want to be that person. It's good to want to be that person,
And Maria, as you're listening to this, I mean, we're both kind of saying a little bit semi-traumatized as we're listening to it, but I'm sure, right?
I was sat here feeling like all these emotions and feelings in like my heart and my body that are it's actually quite scary.
Yeah.
Just listening to it, because it's not something I've come across, fortunately.
Right.
I've got the sweetest husband and have had him for 25 years and I've no plans to trade him in. But listening to this, it's hurting. It's actually hurting to listen to. And I'm so pleased that you've come through it.
Yeah, me
too. Continuing to work through it.
Yeah, I mean, I've come a long way, and I think it's good for people to see an example of somebody who can stand here and say, "I'm not perfect. There's issues. There's still days now and then, but overall, it's nice to be on the other side of it." And there is another side, because when I was in it, I couldn't see it. It's the hopelessness. I don't even think it's describable, because you really do feel like that's all there is.
When you were coming through it, I mean, obviously you had your decision point, your inflection point, where you asked yourself, "Is this all I want to have in my life?" But once you made that decision point, did you get any help? Were you able to just do this yourself?
Yes.
So you basically bootstrapped.
Yeah, because here's another thing people take for granted, that you can get help. If you're in an abusive situation, even if you're going to get out of it, that person's not going to pay for you to get help.
Right.
That person's not going to let you. I couldn't even go to the dollar store to get cat food without him timing me and accusing me of doing something I didn't do. You're not going to be able to leave the house and go get help or do anything. I couldn't be on my computer. It bothered him if I was on the computer. He didn't like me reading books. He didn't like me being on the phone. I couldn't text or call. If I went out on the porch to take a call, I must be screwing that person too. Why can't I talk in front of him? Well, because you don't want me talking in the house. Well, that's because I'm trying to watch TV and you're interrupting it. So you see where I'm going. There's no getting help. You have to kind of get yourself out of it.
And there's no way to win. There's no way to win
There's
at all.
no way to win. There's no way to win except if you can safely extract yourself.
Right.
To have to do that, but you have to want to do it. There was another doctor that I was on their podcast and they were telling me about a study or an experiment that had been done with dogs and they were kept in individually captive, basically in kennels. And, the course of the study, went on, but at one point they opened the doors to the kennels.
Yeah.
The dogs didn't leave. They were free to go and they stayed in their really unpleasant circumstances. And it's really sad, but it just, that really hit home with me that it's not something narcissists often make you feel, like everybody's heard the term, the scapegoat, when you are to blame for everything, even if you had no part of it and nothing to do with it, everything somehow comes back to being your fault. And that's oftentimes how narcissists make you feel. And again, if you're hearing this and feeling it and being treated as such every single day, you're going to think that. You're going to think. At one point in my marriage, I actually went on Google and typed in how to be a good wife because I thought I wasn't being a good wife. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't doing enough. And he had even left me notes, handwritten notes, lists actually of how to be a good wife. I actually have the second one still in my possession and when I was referring to it to add it into the book, it made me sad to be looking at the actual note. And it was literally a list with like little hyphens and do this, do that. I had actually check marked some of them, like a list of like a to-do list, because I honestly thought I was not doing my part. And these were simple things. They were simple things.
It doesn't matter what they are.
I just didn't want to, it's kind of, to say to somebody, you're not being a good wife and this is what you need to do. It's very demeaning.
Well, that's an important point right there. You just used the word demeaning, and that actually goes in a direction I want to ask you about. Because my take on this, I'm curious to know what your take is. My take is that when you are brought up in a situation like this, and then you launch into a marriage afterward that has a similar kind of situation, where you have that continuity, like the dog and the kennel. Yes. When you go through all that, the thought that goes through my mind is, wow, you don't have a lot of self-esteem built up. You don't have a lot of self-love built up.
Zero. Yeah.
So how do you find that yourself? Because that's normal. That's what people normally go to get help for. They want to have some way to feel better about themselves. You didn't have that. How did you do that?
For me personally, I don't think I had a choice, because when I got that sick as I was, and the only cure was, even the doctor said, there's nothing we can do for you. You need to change your life. And so it was either I do that and I live, or I stay there in that situation and see what happens.
So really, you found your self-love, self-esteem starting from survival. Yeah. This is just a survival issue.
If I didn't save myself, nobody was going to. And I'm not going to say that was self-love, but I call it self-respect. I had to respect my life enough to want to live it.
I would call it self-love.
And I knew I had. Yeah, well, everybody calls it whatever they want. Yeah. I'm not so much into labels, but it's self-something. I finally had a sense of myself somehow that I said, this is not what I want. This is what I want over here. And the beautiful thing, and I've always been a goal setter. I'm a huge goal person. If you have something you want to do, you break it down into little baby steps, because those baby steps will make it not seem like this, huge thing that you're trying to achieve. But for me, I felt like once I made that decision that no, this is not what I want in my life. And I actually asked myself that question, what does Dana's life look like? If she could wish for anything, what did it look like? want to be a writer. I want to travel. I do actually want to be married, but to somebody who reciprocates the love I have to give. A few basic things, but I saw it. Where does Dana want to go? Dana wants to go to Italy. I haven't been back to where my family's from in Puerto Rico for years. I want to just go to Florida and see my family. I'm in Illinois. It's a 2-hour plane trip. It's not even that far or expensive. There are all kinds of things I want to see around the world. I want to get to Australia. I want to get to the UK so I could see Anne-Marie, and we'll go have a chat. And I don't drink tea, but there's a Starbucks somewhere there, I'm sure. But, I want to do all this stuff. But when you have like a specific vision in your head, then even without thinking, you're unconsciously taking steps towards that goal. You're enacting it. Because even at that point, when I started thinking in terms of, if I could, maybe I should travel. Maybe I could think in 5 years from now, save enough money for a big trip somewhere. I just started to think about these things because it gave me hope, and it gave me hope to get out of there. And it gave me hope of what my life could be. And, I don't know if it's the law of attraction or whatever it is, people have different ideas about how that works, but, I definitely started moving towards that. And my ex started feeling me pulling away from him that much more. And I think he felt the finality of it. Like, this time I'm not getting her back. And so the irony in all this is that I had already talked to an attorney, was trying to do my homework to get things ready to file. And I came home one afternoon and he was gone. He had just taken all his stuff.
He saw the handwriting on the wall and said, I can't do this.
He said, but also wasn't going to give you that power.
Thank you. That's the narcissist.
Wasn't going to give you that power.
That's the narcissist twist. He couldn't have the offense and go face people after a wife left him. He had to be the one who left me. And he went to my son's school and to his family and told them that I was harassing him and that I was abusing him, and turned it all around. And I just said, you know what? I don't care. I am happy. Even my son, I don't even know if it was a day or two after the move out, he looked at me and he said, wow, I haven't seen you smile or laugh in a long time, Mom. And it just was like, it was everything.
You used a
was
phrase
lighter.
too. When you were kind of wrestling with what terminology to use, you used a phrase. I think it really hit home for me. It sounds like you hit in yourself inside something that you didn't have before, a sense of self. You talked about a sense of self. That's a big deal right there, I think. I suspect that if we were to find a way to summarize that turning point, you somehow said, wait a minute, what about me? For the first time.
Well, narcissists take away who you are. You can't be you. You can't have feelings. You can't have thoughts. They dictate everything. They dictate what like I said, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't say anything. If I did say something he didn't like, he'd correct me. Sometimes he would actually say something to me and then follow it immediately with, you are supposed to respond with, and then tell me how to respond. And then demand that I say those words to him. I mean, you are dictated. Same thing in my childhood. My stepfather very clearly dictated through verbal and nonverbal, communication, how my mother and I should be. The problem is my mother went along with it for her own reasons. She liked her life and she wanted the life she thought he was, only capable of giving her, and that's fine, her choice. I did not always agree, and I would not do the things that I did not agree with doing. And so that becomes a problem for a narcissist. But yes, when you are told over so many years what to say, what to do, what to wear, what music you can listen to, who you can be friends with, everything. What you need to make for dinner, what is okay, what is not okay. Everything is dictated. Yeah, you lose yourself because you don't even know who you are anymore.
That's what's so big about that statement. The statement was, what about me? That's the way I phrased it. But that self notice and saying, well, I'm a self here too. Yes. I actually get to have a life. That's the recognition. I think tell me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like that's the turning point. That's the point where you switched from victim to empowered person.
Right. Because I say in my book, I felt like for me to make him happy, when he was happy, I felt like a Stepford wife. If anybody remembers the Stepford wives from the 80s, or I think it was the 80s, they were basically robots. They looked perfect. They said everything perfectly and smiled, and here's your cupcakes and dinner and everything else. And they were robots. They served you, and that's what I felt like. And I wasn't a Stepford wife. I am a very, strangely, I am a very independent-minded and opinionated, very feeling person. And I was just subdued and held back, and just, I always say it felt like, the way I describe it to people, it's like if you're trying to tread water and somebody keeps pulling your ankles, pulling you down under the water, and you just can't, like, you're just suffocated under there. You're drowning and you can't seem to get up above water. That's what it felt like. But yes, the sense of self was important, because even to start healing, or to begin even thinking about healing, the biggest part of that was finding who I was again.
Yes.
And there were those little bits, like I said, those huge things like, I wanted to travel. I wanted to write. I wanted to do all this stuff. But there were times when I would find myself like, what do I do? And I'm just trying to make dinner, and I'm just like frozen, because I'm so used to cooking things how he wanted them, and he didn't I couldn't even buy this or that because he didn't like them, but I liked them, but I couldn't buy them and I couldn't cook them, so it was like just saying like, it's okay, and giving myself permission, like, he's not here. It's okay. And you know what? If I want to have a pint of ice cream for dinner, I'm going to do it with whipped cream and nuts and everything. I like butter pecan, by the way. So Anne-Marie, when I come to the UK, and after
you're not going to find that in the UK, I'm afraid.
That's an American flavor.
Oh,
you're going to have to lower those standards.
I do creme brulee. I do other stuff. Pudding.
That's fine. You'll have that.
I know you have biscuits over there, like UK biscuits, cookies, right?
UK biscuits.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can do UK biscuits. We'll do that. But you know what I mean? You just have to do the little things. I started listening to music again that I wanted to listen to. It made me happy to paint my nails red, because red's my favorite color, and, to wear lipsticks, just little tiny things, because regardless of your financial situation or whatever your circumstances, there are things you can do to make yourself happy. And if you are filling your heart with that joy and putting that smile back on your face, you find your way to yourself a lot faster. And I feel like you're in a better mind space to enter into the healing.
Well, you're retraining yourself. I mean, it's like the dog who is in the kennel.
Yeah.
You're like the dog in the kennel, but now you're training yourself to say it's okay to be outside of the kennel. And the way I'm going to do that is by painting my nails what I want to paint them, and listening to the music I want to listen to, and eating the food I want to eat, and drinking the drink I want to drink. That's how you get out of the kennel.
It is, but it's hard, because when you've gone through so many years of somebody, I called it the rules, some were spoken and some were unspoken, and obviously some were written, but there were a lot of rules. And when you got in trouble for breaking the rules, I mean, imagine what a little kid feels like when there's a rule at home, and then they go to somebody's house and somebody says, oh, you don't have to worry about that here. And they look, they're just so scared. They're hesitant. They want to break the rule, but they know they'd get in trouble at home. That's what it felt like. You don't want to break the rule. So you have to slowly, egg yourself on. Like, it's okay. Like, even my son, he was 17 at the time that my ex and I divorced, and he stayed with me. He chose to. And even he, at one point, I remember, it was something so minuscule, but even he said, Mom, we don't have to follow the rules anymore. We don't have to do that anymore. And I thought, oh, goodness gracious. Like, you just get you're brainwashed. You just don't realize that it's okay not to have to follow somebody's rules. But boy, what a liberating feeling when you can just be who you are and not have to be restricted.
And it makes sense. I mean, you've got years of being trained the other way. You're retraining yourself is what it amounts to. Yeah. So it's going to take a while to do that.
Yeah. Well, it didn't take too long. I had somebody that knows me. Actually, it was a friend's son that said, shortly after everything said, boy, you're like a wild animal we just let loose from its cage, because I was just, once I started realizing I wasn't getting in trouble to do what Dana wants and think how Dana thinks and say what Dana wants to say, boy, everybody was experiencing Dana on a whole other level.
Hey, Anne-Marie, I apologize. I was interrupting you, but you were trying to say something there a moment ago.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. I was going to say it was a bit like a baby, like learning to take those steps again and take those steps to walk in and find yourself. But you did say something like you just doing the little things like painting your nails red. But those aren't little things, are they? They are big things for you to be like really proud of yourself for. So I just thought that's not a little thing. That's huge. You should be so proud.
See, that's still me minimizing everything.
We all do that.
We're working on
that. But it's,
There are some things I can be like, good job, Dana, pat myself on the back. I'm getting there, but not
one step at a time.
Everything can happen at once. Yeah, exactly.
It's that little baby step.
It basically you're in a long. I mean, yes, you've made a lot of progress in a very short period of time, but you're probably going to continue to reprogram for quite some time because it's. Yeah. I mean, you don't just kind of dismiss all that and get rid of it all at once. There's a lot of retraining that you have to do, and you have to be conscious. You have to be aware. You have to say, "Oh yeah, I'm noticing I'm doing it again. Here's how I'm going to shift my pattern." It's ongoing. Yeah.
It is, and one of the biggest things that I've noticed too. I know a lot of people who've been in bad relationships or traumatic situations. They tend to close themselves off to people altogether. They isolate. Yeah. And even I, was like, no, I'm not going to date. I'm not going to be with anyone ever again. I want that. Who doesn't want that connection and to go home to that person, your best friend and all that, have good marriages like you do, Anne-Marie. But, when I thought about closing myself off and I just even talking to other victims, survivors, whatever they call themselves, because everybody calls themselves something different. But a lot of people just say, no, I'm not ready. I never will. Just not for me. I don't trust anyone, all this and that. But then they go on to heal. But I find that they become very resentful and bitter and angry. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to experience joy and happiness. And it's no criticism against anyone who, has opted to remain alone for whatever reason. And that's not saying that everyone who's alone is miserable, but it was just what I was experiencing with the people that I was talking to. So when I decided to open myself up to this friend who is now my husband, but, to say, okay, I'm willing to try with you only because I do know you. And like you are, I really do like you. I have always liked you. And it was just very easy. It just, you click with some people and you don't click with others. And he and I had just always clicked, but we were busy. He had gotten divorced, from his first wife. And I obviously had my hands a little full with my situation. But what I loved about it is that as much as I thought I needed to be alone and I didn't need to affect anyone, and people think like if you're healing, like you need all this time and this space, I found that interesting to me, at least, that being with somebody and being around other people, but especially in a romantic dynamic, it was almost faster to heal because I was forced to have those struggles that I wouldn't have if I was alone. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So I was being put in situations where I was forced to actually practice or enact those tools or those things I was told I should do or that I should like self-regulation. I could be at home alone and nothing's triggering me. So there's no reason to self-regulate. Well, how am I going to learn that unless something triggers me and I need to self-regulate? And it wasn't pretty, but we got through it. But I don't think I could have done it, or at least not at the speed that I did. And I'm not telling everybody to go get a date and, go get married. But in my situation, I learned that you do actually have to be around people. Isolating is not the answer. If you really want to heal, it's great if you get therapy or whatever it is you're trying to do to heal yourself, but you got to practice it, and you're not going to get good, at what you're doing if you don't actually have people to trigger you into those situations.
Wow. We could carry on that conversation for another hour on just that one topic right there. Oh my goodness.
Food for thought.
Yes. Oh, we'll save that for another conversation, I guess.
All right.
But there are a couple of things we need before we part company. First of all, the book, once again, is called Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. I presume that's available anywhere. Is it just Amazon?
Anywhere books are sold. Most people go with Amazon, but wherever books are sold online, it's on there.
Okay, good. And secondly, you clearly do these podcasts. I'm sure you do social media. You do all kinds of stuff to get word out about what you're doing and so forth. Yes. Are you looking for people to reach out to you if they're going through a similar situation?
Absolutely.
How do they find you?
I would say the best place is my website, danasdiaz.com. You will find the link for the book on there, but you'll also see links to Facebook and Instagram. You can message me on either one, follow me, whatever you want to do. But I do have people reach out to me all the time asking me a question or just wanting to vent about their situation. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a therapist, but I can, offer you resources. I can speak to you from experience. And I do post content every day on social media, that helps to heal. And we have Friday funnies. We always have some kind of funny, little meme or something about some aspect of this mess that we call life on there. And we also have on my website, my press room page, which has all the podcasts I've been on that have been released thus far. And there are many, many, many. And you can find any kind of topic because, like you said, there's a lot to it. There's mental health, there's parenting and motherhood, relationships, divorce, child stuff. We can go everywhere with this. So there's a lot of podcasts.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and I'm sure you'll keep doing them too. That actually brings me to something that I've made it a point to do here on the show for the last almost 2 years, not quite 2 years now, because I noticed that there are many people like you who come onto this show. They talk about their story. They talk about the stuff they learned and how they want to share it with other people, and they do that. They share it. They get on podcasts. They do social media. They write blog posts. They do all this stuff. And they're putting out this content very often to people who they've never met, they've never seen, they never will meet, they never will see. And we kind of skip that part. And I say, wait. There's a whole bunch of good stuff going on here. We're not getting credit for it. So on behalf of those people you've never met and that you've never seen, never will meet, never will see, who you've been helping with all that content you've been putting out, thank you for what you've been doing. Because you're making a difference by doing that.
That's very sweet. Well, I hope so. I said from day one, if I help just one person, get out of a toxic relationship. And I know I have had many people reach out to me and tell me that they've been brave enough and had the strength after hearing or reading something that I've said. So I'm just so glad that people can relate to that and are doing better for themselves.
That's a great thing. And Anne-Marie knows where I'm coming next, but all right. Where's the tie together here? Because we talked about a lot of stuff here. I mean, this is like, wow.
Oh, I've been on an emotional roller coaster for the last hour. My goodness. Firstly, I wanted to say, like Barbie, one of our listeners, has said she's glad you survived it too.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And I think, like I say, we've been on an emotional roller coaster, but I think one thing that we could all relate to and we should all do, which you did tremendously, was lay on your sofa, lay in the dark and ask yourself, what do you want from your life? The power that sentence has to you and to many is exceptional.
It's life-changing.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. That's a great way to end the conversation too. I always like to leave it on an up note. And that's like the major.
Yeah. See, we did good with this dark topic.
We did. Well, that's the story. Whenever you're talking about what they call a dark night of the soul, there's always the dawn. And that's what we're trying to get to is the dawn.
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for getting to the dawn. Thank you for helping us get to the dawn. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.